ever leave a meeting so disappointed because you thought that you didn't connect with your prospect? Or better yet, you just thought you had the greatest meeting in the world, and guess what? It went nowhere. Well, we've all been there, and that's what we're going to talk about in today's episode. Welcome back to the show, and let's get into it. Some of the things that have been on my mind lately is because I listen to a lot of people that interact with, someone on some level, whether it's business or they're trying to communicate something, they're trying to get their point of view across, and they're having this conversation and they're continuing to just hear the back and forth, and they actually believe that whatever they're saying is resonating. And that may not always be the case, but I would say that a lot of times you're kind of in that moment, and whatever you're pitching or whatever your point of view is or whatever you're trying to portray, it just comes across and it may be well received. And people may be really excited about it, but in the end, everybody's busy. And the reality is that if you're going out and you're doing any type of prospecting and trying to build a business or build an organization, then you're going to have to keep going and not think that every single meeting was a home run, because it probably wasn't. I think the reality that people fail to understand, and this is something that I learned early on, and I also, to be fair, have to remind myself from time to time, because when you're interacting with people, you think that they're resonating with what you're saying. You actually think that they are buying what you're selling and they're going to go with you. They're going to go with your service. They like all your ideas, but really they're just being nice. And maybe they're just counting the minutes until they can end the conversation with you and they can move on, and they're not going to give it another thought. Or on the flip side, maybe they are interested in that very moment. And as soon as you leave, other things just come up and things just keep coming and people live life. And, the world, if the only thing they could think about was your conversation and your pitch, then yeah, maybe that would resonate in their brain. But guess what? That's not how life really operates. And this is where I think a lot of times people make mistakes in not going through the necessary process of continuing to move forward. That's why you want to have multiple prospects. When you're going into sales, you don't want to just sell to one person or just 5 people. You want to give yourself the majority of the opportunity. It's kind of like baseball. Let's use that analogy. If somebody's batting 300, over lifetime, chances are if they're batting over 300, they're going to be in the Hall of Fame. So that means that they're only hitting 3 out of 10 times, right? So 3 out of 10 pitches, they're actually getting on base, they're getting a hit. So that's the way you need to look at when you're interacting with people, especially if you're just going to, continue down a path. And if you're starting something, you just have to push through. And that's just the reality of what we all have to deal with. And life gets busy. I mean, take it from my point of view. I don't know how many times I have to put it and make it relatable to what I go through. As a business owner, people approach me all the time. They're trying to sell me something. They're trying to tell me why their service or product is something great. And I will tell you that there are a lot of times where in the presentation, I get really excited because the salesperson is that good. The person, given the demonstration shows me something that I get really excited about, but it's almost instantaneous after that meeting ends when that feeling starts to fade. And it's funny because sometimes it fades a lot faster depending on what you have going on, or you're getting inundated by, other things that you have to deal with, or you just get busy. And then all of a sudden that feeling of interest just dissipates. And probably by the next day or the day after, if that same person were to call me back, I would be like, yeah, I think it was great, but after giving it some thought, because I really didn't even think about it, to be honest. I didn't think about it because all these other things were occupying my brain space, and my bandwidth, that when it did come back around, it wasn't really that interesting. And maybe it's just too much to think about and too much to do. And even though it'd probably be a good thing, it wasn't really that important. So I'm not saying that it shouldn't be done and that's the way it should be, but I'm just telling you that's the way it is. And I think a lot of times that, we want to believe that whatever opinion that we share or solution, that we pitch and somebody's like just eating it up and and they're just agreeing with you and they're telling you that, yeah, that's exactly what I need. But the reality is that there is that element that people don't always mean what they say. I think they do, or they're just trying to be nice, or they don't know how to say no and tell you, you know what, that's really not for me. And I think part of us doesn't want to be rejected, right? We don't like that rejection either. So when we're doing that interaction, it's almost like we're kind of setting the pace or setting it up, so they can say something good about, like, the idea or the solution that you're pitching or that you came up with, just because you want to feel better about it and you want to feel accomplished. But the reality is results are results. If people aren't buying or you don't close the deal, then you lost the deal. It's a zero sum game, right? You're either winning the deal and you sell them something, or they move on and you move on. What I'm really trying to communicate is that that's why you need a process to continue knocking on doors, pushing through it. It's like going to the gym. You're putting the reps in, right? You want to get to a certain end result, right? You have to put the work in. The same thing is when you're trying to get your point across, or you're trying to build your business, or you're trying to sell your product or solution, whatever that is. You want to continue through that process and keep knocking on doors, and you want to be sure that you're putting some level of system together that you can follow and just continue on, because after you keep doing that, the results will come. If you put the work in, the results will come. If you are consistent about, working out and putting the reps in, right, you're going to get stronger. You're going to get better. But ultimately what you're looking for are the needles in the haystack. If you could predict which client was going to buy at that very moment, and you just, all the things just aligned just perfectly because you had some level of forethought or the ability to see the future, right? And just know inherently, you could read their mind that this was going to be the prospect, then yeah, I mean, good for you. That would be a huge deal, right? But we know that's not reality. There are certain things that you can do over time to improve that process and go, well, I went to see 100 people. I only got 5 closes, right? Maybe I want a 10% closing ratio. So what could I have done better? Maybe I'm taking a look at the, meetings that I attended. I'm looking at my notes. I'm looking at the scenario and the situation. I mean, you don't want to overthink it, because you can do that too. I mean, I'm really good at that. I am really good at overthinking things. But what I have to do is I have to bring myself back down to planet Earth, right? Out of that mindset, out of that element of, just looking at every single thing. What could I have done better? Could I have done this? Could I have done that? You don't need to put that level of detail into it. You just need to look at the situation in its entirety, right? Maybe it was you just spent too much time with the prospect. You had an hour and 15-minute meeting when you really could have got it done in 40 and 45 minutes. And, who knows? That could have been the reason why they lost interest, because you just stayed there too long. Maybe there's a certain kind of prospect that you gel better with, right? So the idea is that you're going to bring these stats, you're going to look at what you've done, and you're going to evaluate it, and then you're going to make adjustments, small adjustments, right? Don't make the big adjustments. Make small adjustments. And what you're really trying to do is get that closing ratio up. And you're going to do a lot better if you don't get into the analysis paralysis mode, right? Which means that all you're doing is spending all of your time with no action. But at the same time, you want to spend some of your time, right, doing the analysis and not just being a bull in a china shop and just go, 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 go. I mean, I see people do that. It works for some people to a certain extent, but they never end up, getting the most efficient way to continue to get business. I think the takeaway from what we're talking about is that if you're going into a meeting or you're having a conversation with someone, don't think that they're going to remember it even an hour later, or maybe even 15 minutes later, because people are busy. And if you put yourself in their shoes, and if you say to yourself, well, if somebody's pitching me an idea or they're telling me something that they want me to agree with, I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be like a seller service. They might just want to have a point of view, and that you're going to be on the same page. It doesn't necessarily mean that isn't going to be outside of your brain matter in a period of time, right? It could just be in one ear. It might stay there and resonate for a little while, and then it might be out. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's just the reality that you have to deal with, and that's okay. So the main takeaway is build a process, build a system, be consistent, and just keep going. If you found this episode helpful, share it with someone who needs to hear it. I always encourage you to subscribe, and if you have time, leave a comment and rate the show. You can find us on YouTube at Hey Charles Biz, Hey Charles 77 on Instagram and TikTok, Hey Charles on Apple Podcast and Spotify, and Charles Ernst on LinkedIn. See you next time.